I never thought I'd be writing about something like this. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. 6 months before our planned wedding, everything seemed perfect. We had a beautiful home with a small garden, 2 cats, and were busy planning our big day. That afternoon started like any other. My fiancée and I had a meeting at the wedding venue to finalize some details. We drove separately since she was coming straight from her teaching job at the elementary school. Near the end of our meeting, she mentioned that her friend Sarah needed a ride from the auto shop where she was dropping off her rental car. I didn't think twice about saying yes. Sarah lived just 10 minutes from our place. I got home and tried calling my fiancée several times over the next few hours, getting more worried with each unanswered call. After about 2 hours, I texted Sarah asking if everything was okay. My fiancée finally came home around 9 p.m., saying sorry and that she lost track of time hanging out with Sarah. A few minutes later, Sarah replied to my text, "Sorry, what do you mean? I haven't seen her today at all." When I showed my fiancée the message, she just shrugged it off, saying Sarah was probably confused or playing some kind of joke. She walked outside to make a phone call. Something felt very wrong, and for the first time in our 5-year relationship, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her phone records online through our shared account. The records showed she had called Sarah right after walking outside, probably to get their stories straight. But what really caught my attention was an hour-long call with an unknown number right before our venue meeting. When I asked about the rental car place, she had quick answers for everything. Too quick, maybe. I decided to sleep on it, thinking I might be overreacting. The next morning, I asked her to show me Sarah's text asking for the ride. I said I'd apologize for doubting her if she could show me that. She refused. Then I mentioned seeing her on the phone while driving to the venue, and she claimed it was Sarah she was talking to. That's when I knew she was lying. The phone record showed a completely different number. Her story changed immediately. "Oh, that was just Tom from work." We had to discuss a student's progress report. When I asked why they couldn't discuss it over the phone instead of meeting in person, she said she needed to show him some teaching materials. Later she said his name was Mike, not Tom. By this point, my stomach was in knots. We never lied to each other. It was one of our core values. I asked to see her texts with this coworker. She refused at first, but after about 30 minutes of back and forth, she finally handed over her phone. The texts I saw made me sick to my stomach. They were clearly in a relationship, talking about being together and saying horrible things about me. This had been going on since she started her new job at a different school 6 weeks ago. The guy was a much older teacher, divorced with kids. What made it worse was that I had been working extra hours at my accounting job to support us while she got settled in her new position. I even told her not to worry about picking up tutoring jobs on the side like she usually did. We had a mortgage, the cats, and she had recently started taking pottery classes. I wanted to make sure she could pursue her interests without financial stress. The next few days were a blur of confrontations and revelations. Every time we talked, she found new ways to blame me for her actions. According to her, I worked too much, didn't listen enough, spent too much time on my phone handling client emails. When I pointed out that I was working extra to support us, she said she would have preferred to work more herself, which made no sense given our previous conversations. She tried to minimize what happened, saying it was just a week-long thing and they only kissed once. But those texts told a different story. When I brought them up, she would change the subject or turn it back on me. The hardest part was when she said she wouldn't have needed to talk to someone else if I had been a better listener. That really hurt. We had to figure out practical matters too. The house was in both our names, and we had the cats to think about. We agreed that either I would buy her out of the house, or we'd sell it and split the proceeds. As for the cats, we decided one of us would take one and the other would take two. She also needed to move her pottery wheel and supplies out of the garage where she had set up her little studio. It felt surreal discussing these mundane details while our life together was falling apart. 5 years of building a future together, all undone by 6 weeks with someone new. The wedding venue still needed to be canceled, deposits needed to be handled, and family needed to be told. But first, I needed time to process what had happened and figure out my next steps. A week after finding out, we finally had a real conversation. It started the same way as before, with her listing all my faults. According to her, I spent too much time answering work emails, didn't pay enough attention to her new pottery projects, and wasn't emotionally available. She brought up times when she felt I wasn't supportive enough, like when I tried to help her make a budget. That budget situation still bothers me. She had mentioned owing me a few $100s and said she'd pay it back from her next paycheck. I pulled up our joint account to show her it was closer to $3,000. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I just wanted to help her understand our finances since I work with numbers all day. She took it as me being controlling about money. Looking back, maybe I could have handled it better, but I was just worried about our wedding expenses piling up. What really got to me was how she kept saying I was throwing away 5 years over one mistake. I had to keep reminding her that I wasn't the one who threw it away. She did that when she chose to start something with her coworker. She also got angry that I told my sister and best friend about what happened. According to her, we could have worked through this privately. But how could I keep something like this to myself? After a lot of questioning, I finally got the full story, or at least what she was willing to admit. They started talking about 3 weeks before I found out. She says they only met up once outside of school to play basketball at the park. They kissed, and that was it. Based on their texts, I believe that's true, but I also believe it would have gone further if I hadn't caught them. That night, after our talk, she went out and wouldn't tell me where. I'm pretty sure she was either with him or her friend Lisa, who's been supporting her through this. Living together during this time has been incredibly awkward. I can tell she wants me to forgive her and try again. She keeps saying that our main problem was poor communication, that we got too comfortable in our routine, that we stopped really talking to each other. Maybe she's right about some of that. We did fall into a routine: work, home, takeout dinner, TV, bed, repeat. But that's not why she cheated. She cheated because instead of telling me she was unhappy, she looked for attention somewhere else. Instead of having a hard conversation with me, she had secret conversations with him. She broke my trust and then tried to make it my fault. To keep myself sane, I started going to the gym every day. I also threw myself into studying for my CPA exam, something I'd been putting off. I took a week off work to clear my head. During that time, I called the wedding venue to cancel. We lost some money, but they said they'd refund part of our deposit if they could book another wedding for that date. I also kept in touch with her parents, who live across the country. They've always treated me like a son, and I felt they deserved to know what was happening. I assured them their daughter was safe and that things were civil between us. They were devastated but thanked me for letting them know. The housing market has gotten so expensive that I can't find anything close to what we have for the same mortgage payment. Even rent would cost me more than what I pay now. After looking at my options, I decided to try buying her out of the house. She seemed okay with this plan. We agreed to get an appraiser to determine the value and figure out what half the equity would be. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh. The practical part of my brain says it would be easier to forgive and try to work things out. We could keep our home, our life, everything we've built. When I'm alone in the house, surrounded by all our things and memories, it's tempting to think we could move past this. But then I remember how easily she lied to my face, how she talked about me to him, how she only confessed when I caught her, and even then tried to blame me. I remember that trust, once broken, is like a cracked mirror. You might glue it back together, but you'll always see the lines where it broke. The hardest part is knowing that soon I'll have to say goodbye to one of our cats. They've been together since they were kittens, and splitting them up feels cruel. But keeping them together would mean giving them all to her, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Every time I look at them playing or curled up together, my heart breaks a little more. It's been 3 months since I discovered everything, and I want to share how things turned out. The first week after finding out, I'm embarrassed to admit I begged her to stay. I promised we could work things out, said I'd be a better partner, even blamed myself for what happened. Looking back, I barely recognized that desperate version of myself. My wake-up call came when she told me she needed time to choose between me and him. That's when I realized how far I'd let my self-respect slip. After spending 5 years building a life together, I was competing with someone she'd known for 6 weeks. That's when I started focusing on myself. First, I moved our joint savings into my personal account, calculated what portion was hers, and transferred that amount to our shared account for her to take. I started taking care of myself in ways I hadn't for years. I bought new clothes for the first time in ages. I'd always put that money toward our home or her pottery supplies instead. I got a massage, started meeting friends for coffee, and reconnected with my family. Living together was strange. She slept in the guest room, and we only talked about necessary things like, "Did you feed the cats?" Or, "The appraiser is coming tomorrow." She still refused to take responsibility, claiming that if I had been more attentive, she wouldn't have needed to find someone else. I stopped arguing. You can't reason with someone who's determined to blame you for their choices. I handled most of the house selling process. Found an agent, scheduled viewings, prepared the house for photos, just like I'd handled most things in our relationship. We met with 3 different agents because she insisted on getting multiple opinions. Even though it was exhausting, I did it all to speed up the process of moving on. The house sold quickly. She moved out in mid-May, taking 2 of our cats with her. Saying goodbye to them was one of the hardest things I've ever done. A few weeks later, I met her at the park to see them. While they remembered me and seemed happy to see me, they were clearly adapting well to their new life. That gave me some peace. She moved to a smaller house in an older neighborhood. Last I heard, she was fixing up the backyard for the cats. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my work. Between my regular job and my side business doing tax preparation, I managed to save enough for a down payment on a new place. Finding a new house was hard in this market, but after 5 failed offers, I finally got one accepted. It's smaller than our old place, but in a nice area with a perfect little sunroom where I can work. The cat that stayed with me loves sitting in the window watching birds. About a month after everything happened, I met someone. We started as friends. She'd been through something similar and helped me process everything. Over time, it grew into more. She's different from my ex in all the right ways. Independent, honest, and actually talks about problems instead of avoiding them. Being with her has shown me how many red flags I ignored in my previous relationship. I still think about my ex sometimes. Random memories pop up, both good and bad. My therapist helps me process these thoughts and reminds me that I might never get the apology or closure I want. She's too proud to admit she was wrong, and that's something I have to accept. I rarely communicate with my ex now. The last time was about finalizing some paperwork for the house sale. I don't plan to see her or the other cats again. At first, this hurt, but now I understand it's better this way. Looking back, I'm grateful this happened before we got married. Yes, I lost my fiancé, my home, and 2 of my cats. But I gained something more valuable, self-respect and a chance at real happiness. I was so caught up in our comfortable routine that I didn't realize how unhappy I was. I was willing to ignore problems because change seemed too difficult. Now I'm in a better place. I'm taking care of myself, building stronger relationships with family and friends, and learning to be a better partner. My new girlfriend and I take things day by day, and for the first time in years, I'm excited about the future. Sometimes the hardest endings lead to the best beginnings. If you're going through something similar, remember that the pain won't last forever. Focus on yourself, accept help from others, and don't be afraid to start over. Life has a way of working out, just not always how we planned. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.